Since the Spanish-American War, Spain has been in a state of funk, a depression almost. The Spanish economy seems weak. The Spanish national will seems non existent. And when the Bourbons that were placed on the throne during the succession crisis that leads to the Spanish Civil, that leads to the Franco-Prussian War, reign. The fact is, a series of bland governments rules what is in fact a stagnant society and a stagnant economy. After the Spanish-American War's defeat, the Spanish society is in a deep sense of malaise. It's like it has a giant social sense of everything's bad, like they've been poisoned spiritually. Now, during the early 20th century, particularly in the 19 teens, the army has been growing in power. And around 1920, a general takes over, Miguel Primo de Rivera. Miguel Primo de Rivera is an old style military dictator. But his desire isn't to turn Spain into a conquering power or anything like that. He wants to rule Spain peacefully, and he doesn't think that any other institution, the political parties, are capable of doing it. Spain is in a state of dejection, depression, angst, ennui, the meaninglessness of whatever. And in this moment, it needs daddy to take care of it and keep everyone reasonably okay. And that's Miguel Primo de Rivera's attitude about his governance. Spain is going to be taken care of by him. Now, during this time of political stagnation and economic ennui, there is, in fact, a vibrancy in one aspect of intellectual life. And that vibrancy is philosophy. Two of the world's, not Spain's, but the world's great philosophers come to prominence during the time of Primo de Rivera and after, in the late 20s and early 1930s and mid 1930s. They are Jose Ortega y Gasset. Jose Ortega has the distinction of being a philosopher that an everyday person can read. Heidegger and Ortega, independently at about the same time, come up with similar insights on the nature of life, the universe, and everything. But Heidegger is a typical German philosopher, very didactic. Reading his stuff is like reading a series of geometrical theorems. Ortega, in addition to being a philosopher, is also a journalist. So he is used to writing stories in a way that human beings who are not themselves postgraduate students can understand. One of the favorite ideas of Jose Ortega is posted on my board. You are yourself plus your circumstances. And what that means is an individual is not simply their interior, their personality, their drives, their likes, their dislikes. It is the interior self grafted into a context of circumstances, the culture that you're a part of, the family that you're born into, the language that you speak, the religious values that you take in. All of that is as much a part of you as anything else. So a person's identity is absolutely linked to their culture. You could take two identical twins, genetically very, very, very much alike, and have one raised in Spain and another raised in Russia. And by the time they're your age, they're going to be very different people because you are yourself, the internal things, plus your circumstances, the culture, the language, the religion, all of that's going to be different. And so you're going to have two people that are similar in terms of their drives, but different in terms of the way they express those drives. Then you've got Miguel de Unamuno. You know that I am a lousy Christian. I'm a Christian believer who very poorly practices his faith. Unamuno is an agnostic who I admire more than many Christians. And here's why. Miguel de Unamuno desperately, desperately wants to believe in a God. He desperately, desperately wants to believe that the universe has an author, that life has a purpose, that there is meaning, that this is not all some great cosmic accident. He deeply and desperately wants to believe. And this is a man who follows up every possible opportunity that occurs to him to explore whether or not he can bring himself to believe. But ultimately, he is unwilling to or unable to make the kind of leap of faith that most believers make. No, I can't prove to a skeptic that God exists, nor can I prove to a skeptic that communism is evil. People need to discover certain things. I'm going to advocate for my belief that God exists and that communism is evil, but I can't prove to a skeptic those things are objectively true. So in both cases, I inform myself and I make a leap of faith. I believe God exists. Can't prove it, but I know it. It's a matter of belief, not of rationality. And the same is true of my anti-communism. Although I have a lot of evidence, I cannot prove to a true believing communist that what he believes in is just wrong. What he'll end up saying is communism that he believes in has never really been tried yet. That's the go-to sort of answer for that. Well, Unamuno cannot bring himself to believe. But this man wrestles with faith like few believers do. It matters to him. He sacrifices time, he sacrifices energy, he beats himself up, he wrestles with the prospect of believing, but he just can't do it. He just can't say God exists. He's got to have it proven, he's got to prove it himself, he's got to have something demonstrable, and he cannot bring himself to do it. It's like a person who is an acrophobe, afraid of heights, not being able to bring themselves to go near the edge of a building and look out over the terrace in a skyscraper. Just can't bring themselves to do it. So Unamuno is a mystic. He desperately wants to believe, but he never really, as far as speaking and writing goes, never really brings himself to do it. So this is the Spain of the 1920s. But as the 20s moves into the 1930s, the society and the factions within Spain begin to heat up. Primo de Rivera withdraws in the early 1930s, and by 1936, there is a second free election in this new Spanish Republic. And there are two basic factions within the electorate, within political parties. In the 1936 election, there is Frente Popular, the Popular Front, who are later going to be called Republicans, even though they're not. They're nothing like Republicans in the United States. And even though they say they are for the Spanish Republic, in fact, they are backed by the Soviet Union, and many of them are communists or anarcho-syndicalists or socialists. But the Popular Front, they say they represent the interests of the Spanish people. And this includes the centrist CEDA alliance, which is basically the equivalent of, if there is something akin to America's Democratic or Republican parties, it would be the centrist alliance, CEDA. And many center-left people end up becoming part of the Frente Popular, the Popular Front. But a major faction within the Popular Front are the communists. The Comintern, ordered by Joseph Stalin, has adopted, instead of fighting against other societies, other factions within democratic circles or progressive circles or socialist circles, what Stalin and the Comintern have ordered is for a common popular front to be established of all parties of the left against fascism and parties of the right. So, Frente Popular includes many communists, but it also includes a group of people that you probably don't know much about, anarcho-syndicalists. Anarcho-syndicalists believe in people freely choosing to associate, and through these associations having all of life's needs met. Anarcho-syndicalism takes hold in some mountain villages during the period of the Spanish Civil War in the Republican zone. And along with Israeli kibbutzim, these villages are some of the only examples of genuine socialism working. And here's how they were. People didn't cook family meals. They tended to eat a common meal that was produced in a community kitchen. Everyone worked in the kitchen every few days. Everyone worked in the fields every few days. Everyone worked in the factory every few days. We all share our work. Committees come together to decide who does what. The committee that decides these things changes, and everyone gets to participate in that. Children are not raised by their family. They are raised by the community. And all of the old traditions are faith and politics are going to be replaced by these new communitarian values. But what makes the anarcho-syndicalist communes work is they're small scale and they're voluntary, and that people can leave. Because it's small scale, because it's voluntary, because they knew all the people that were involved, these communes, at least during the brief time that they existed, actually work. But the anarcho-syndicalists are sort of loosey-goosey leftists who want to make of Spain a new society without the rigid military discipline of communism. Now, Frente Popular, the Popular Front, also includes separatists from the Basque and Catalan regions. Catalonia is here, near the city of Barcelona in eastern Spain. And the Basque region is up here near the provinces of Navarre, and the city of Pamplona, where they do the running of the bulls, is part of the Basque region of Navarre. So the Basques want to have an independent society, separate from Spain. And the Catalans want to have an independent society separate from Spain. By the way, the Catalans are still around, and they are still trying to break away from Spain today. The Spanish government has said no, and it's a big problem within the European Union today. So these separatists join with Frente Popular because they think they'll have a better chance to separate from the Spanish nation under leftists than under rightists. And we'll talk about the rightists next. I will say this. When the war actually begins, the Frente Popular is going to be supported by international communists from around the world. These international brigades are going to include hardcore communists from a variety of nations around the world. The Americans, and there are plenty of them, who join the international brigades form an American Army unit. Not U.S. Army, but an American unit, a unit of American leftist soldiers called the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, named after the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves. So when the fighting begins, leftists and communists from around the world, including Americans, are going to join these international brigades in support of the Spanish Republic, which is the Popular Front government. Now on to the nationalists next time.